Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. news, ops, and a little bit of paranoia. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin Podcast.
I always feel like we should have shorter intro music. What do you think? Is it too long?
No.
I feel like we're just standing here staring at nothing.
Well, no? I'm mastodoning, so I don't.
Oh, okay. Okay, you're busy with other things. Fine. All right. Welcome everybody to tonight's episode of the Iron Sysadmin Podcast, where we debate the lifelong issue, the age-old issue of whether our intro music is too long or not. So, send us feedback. Is the intro music too long? I don't think it is. Really, I don't think it is.
Why would you bring it up then?
I don't know. It just came to mind while it was playing. And, this is a podcast where we speak our mind. So that
I don't think the intro music is long enough. I think we need to be able to bang our heads and stare into space longer. Then you cut it. I
could get the full cut of that song. We could just play the whole thing at the beginning. It's like 2.5 or 3 minutes long. That'd be fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a good idea.
Is there like a Stairway to Heaven version that's like 20 minutes long? Because that'd be even better.
That'd be perfect.
It's Iron Sysadmin Podcast, now 20 minutes longer.
Now 20 minutes long. That's what people want. A longer Iron Sysadmin Podcast. My God, that episode with Paul was so long. Even split in half. Each half was over an hour. They were like an hour and a half to 2 hours each.
Yeah, but we enjoyed ourselves.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. It was fun. So go back and listen to that, but only if you have a lot of time to kill. Because I guess when you combine us and Paul, who we're all known to go on, it was destined to be a long podcast. All right. Anyway, we're already off topic, and we haven't even introduced the topic yet. But I think I left off with welcome to the show. I'm your host, Nate, and joining me tonight is Jason. Hi, Jason.
That's me.
That's you. There's no Uncle Mark tonight, so you guys won't hear any Disney tunes. I'm sorry.
I'm not singing.
Whether you like it or not. Although I do have
Disco.
Nope, that isn't it.
No.
Nope. Nope.
Yay.
There it is.
Yay.
It's the pink button. Remember that, guys. It's the pink button.
Yay.
Uncle Mark is the pink button. All right. So tonight we're going to. I want to continue with our cloud arc. That we started back. I guess it was October, November was the first time we'd start talking about cloud stuff. I think security in the cloud is an interesting topic and probably a very important one, right? So we talked about like running apps in the cloud. We talked about lift and shift. We talked about some cloud terminologies. There's probably lots more we can dig into here, but we can't really do a cloud topic justice without also covering security. So instead of just tacking it on at the end, like most people do with security, we're going to talk about security now, like right now, on this show, this episode, right? So, security in the cloud. Sorry,
you should all be secure. Quick, everybody be secure.
Everybody be secure. Okay, we're done. Bye. Security done. This isn't going to be like a checklist or like do this and you'll be compliant. It's going to be a discussion between two old sysadmins. And just what we think are important topics to consider when you're moving things to the cloud, how things are the same, how things are different, right? So first, I figured we'd talk at least very briefly about what security on-prem kind of looks like, right? You've got your own data center, your own network. Theoretically, that network is secure from unknown people, right? Like that's the intention, right? You set up your network. Unless you are something where, like Jason and I both worked in higher ed, obviously we had a specific problem of there are unknown people that have to be on our network, right? And those had to be isolated from, the data center networks. But they're, I guess it's basically the same concept of hostiles, right? So hostiles trying to get into your network, you don't want them in, right? I don't want to say it's an easy task, but it's a more straightforward task, I'll say, because you've got a defined perimeter, which is your physical network, right? Your physical data center. So it's easy, right? You put some locks on the door, you put key access cards, you have a firewall, you have someone hopefully that knows how to run that firewall, and you do your best to defend your network. Just like if you had a castle, right? You had a castle, you have a moat around the castle, got a drawbridge to let the right people in and out, and the bad guys shouldn't be able to get in. In the cloud, that's different, right? In the cloud, you still have a lot of the same concepts, but you don't have the physical perimeter, right? And Jason, feel free to like chime in at any point here where you think I'm going like off the deep end. But I think thus far I've I've hit it, right?
Ding!
Da-ding.
That kind of time?
Right. So in the cloud, you're in someone else's data center. You may not even know where that data center is. You may have a vague idea where it is. You might be able to look up where it is, but you don't have physical access to it. Unless, I mean, I guess there probably are some cloud programs where maybe you can do that. But generally, what we're talking about, your average cloud tenant, you don't have access. You don't even know where your VM is running. You can't just walk in and point to it because you don't know where the data center is. You don't know what hypervisor it's running on. It's just not possible, right? You don't know what network gear is on or what network gear it's running on. You don't have any access to that network gear. You don't have a defined physical perimeter like you do with your own on-prem network, right? So that kind of changes the game a little bit, right? Now, obviously, your cloud provider is going to give you some tools to, like some very basic tools, which I'll touch on right now, and then we'll have some more advanced tools, which Jason hopefully has information on because he put them in here and I've never touched any of them.
Wait.
He's like,
I'm
wait,
supposed to know
wait,
this
what?
stuff?
I just put the names in there. No,
I'm just faking it till I make it, man.
yeah, right. All these years, he's just been pretending. But so, at the very basic level, right? Within your cloud provider, you're going to have the ability to define your own networks, define your own firewall rules, right? But those are all software defined. They're logical, not physical, right? And that brings about its own complexities, right? Because you can't physically go and like see these things and touch them and whatever you need to do to determine what's what. And I've run into issues with specifically with customers I worked with at Red Hat where they have some weird issue and they don't have access to certain layers of that stack, so they can't see what's going on there. You have to depend on the cloud provider. So you have to trust that cloud provider that they're giving you the right information and that their own network is secure. So, I guess I said we're going to talk about how it's the same and how it's different. So how is it the same? I mean, there are some things that are obviously the same. You've got physical machines, you've got hardware, you've got virtual machines, you've got host-based firewalls. You've got security groups, they call them, right? Which is basically, is that more like a network firewall, or is that more like?
It's just they're ACLs, effectively. I mean, security groups are they're very akin to like normal ACL, I guess. No, NACLs, network ACLs in like AWS. A network ACL is more like an ACL on like a Cisco box, where it's like you have to set them up inbound and outbound, and they're not stateful. They don't really let exactly what you've told them in or out. Right. Whereas security groups are stateful. So if you set up a security group that says inbound port 80, it knows, right, so port 80 is coming in, and I keep the state of that, and I know what port needs to be opened outbound to get the return traffic out there. So the security groups are more like a stateful firewall, and network ACLs are more like the ACLs that you would find on like a router or a switch.
So I've never touched network ACL on any cloud provider. I didn't even know that was a thing that existed. Security groups are the things that I've touched, and they're similar to a host-based firewall, except they're not. Right, they're not on the host. Are they more like a network firewall that is directly in front of a specific host, or can you treat them more like a network firewall that's in front of, say, a network of hosts?
You treat them more like they're on the I believe they're on the VPCs. I don't know how this translates into Azure, because I know right. Azure has similar things, but I'm not exactly sure what they term them or how they work there.
Right.
But network ACLs are basically attached to a VPC, so it's it's a sort of a, the way I would look at it is if you have a like internal stuff, their network ACLs are great for internal stuff. I have an internal network that should only ever see traffic from other internal networks. I can put a network ACL on that just says, here's all of my IP range. These are the IPs that are in my network. And then it'll just automatically block anything that's not in that IP range, which takes out a lot. It can take out a lot of traffic depending on how you set things up. And then your security groups are more like I would say they're more like an IP table setup on a specific host. Although you can share them between hosts, so you can apply them to multiple hosts, multiple VMs or databases, or like pretty much every network connected type of item in AWS can have a security group assigned to it. And you can use the same security group as long as it's in the same region and zone. I believe you can use the same security group across any one of those resources.
So, but
you can use it across all of them at the same time.
It's the same group definition, but is it the same like logical device? I guess is what I'm getting at. I guess, does it really matter?
For a security group?
Right.
No, no. I wouldn't say that it's the same logical device. I mean, because you have, so say you have like an RDS instance, you can apply the security group to that.
Yeah.
Which is most likely running on completely different hardware, somewhere completely different from where your VMs are. And then you have like your EC2 instances, which you can apply the same security group to.
I guess,
and they're just VMs.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if I were to take the security group and call it a firewall, right? And I were to put it on a network diagram, and I were drawing a network and my hosts, right? Where would it fall? Would it be like, here's my host, here's its connection to the network, and the security group is on that link? Or is it more like, here's my network, the security group is here, and my hosts are behind it? I think it's more like it's right in front of the host.
The first one, yeah. So it would be right in front of the hosts. But
right.
But you know, like I said, the same security group can be replicated multiple times,
but it's
without
more
having
like
to recreate it. Yeah.
It's more like a definition, though. It's more like, these are the ports I want to open if I'm running a web server. These are the ports I want to open if I'm running a database server. These are the ports I want to open if I'm running application foo, right?
Right. Whereas a network ACL is the latter one that you were talking about. That would be between networks. So like between VPCs. Okay,
and that's an important distinction, right? Because if you have two hosts that want to talk to each other, you have to realize they're going to go out one definition and in another, right? Yep. So if you have outbound rules in a security group, can you do that? They're inbound only, aren't they?
Yes, actually,
you can do outbound.
They're inbound and outbound. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the cool things is that you don't have to. So a lot of hosts are dynamic, like IP address wise.
Right.
So you don't necessarily know what address is going to come up, but the way security groups work, you can create a rule in the security group that says allow traffic on port 80 from anyone in the security group. So when you apply it to a new host, automatically that rule is sort of created in the background. So it's very dynamic that way.
Good. And that's actually a whole other distinction, right? That's something that is similar but different from an on-premise deployment, where the IP address schemes could be wildly different than what you're used to. Now, I guess if you've got your own networks defined and whatnot, you can define what IP space your machines come up in, right? You've got like virtual IPs that are assigned to these things. They're not always necessarily random, right? I guess they're never random. But
you can static
predictable.
Like you can static within the IP range that you've, like the subnet that you've assigned to the subnet that your VM is in.
What I mean is
statically assign the address.
What I mean is the subnet. You define the IP space for that subnet, just like you would on-prem.
Yes.
Right? So if you've got a network, you've got a subnet assigned to that network. That is assuming you've taken the time to define a network, right?
Yes.
Because if you just like log into, the AWS console and spin up a machine with the bare minimum setup, you're just going to get a non-routable IP from Amazon, and then a public IP that can change. I'm not going to say at any minute, but at any reboot, right?
any shutdown and restart of the EC2 instance.
Right.
If you just reboot the OS, it'll keep that auto assigned
Right.
public address.
Okay, so right. Any I guess terminate's not the right word. Terminate is what deletes it.
No, terminate deletes it. So it's
is it called a shutdown? It's a stop. Right. Any stop and start again.
Yeah, stop I think is what it's using.
Because stop and start could move it to a whole different piece of hardware, whereas a reboot should keep it on the hardware it's on.
Potentially put it on a different piece of hardware, but yes.
I said could.
Yeah, a reboot.
Could. Not that it will.
Right.
It could.
Right. So looking at it this way, like a reboot is just like a physical machine. If you reboot the machine, like I guess it's not completely like that, but if you reboot the machine, you're not shutting down like the CPU on that machine.
Yeah, it's a VM. It's a VM, right? And if you take a VM down to its bare minimums, right, it is a process running on a piece of hardware.
Right.
If you
So
reboot the process is not stopping. So therefore, the machine
Right.
shouldn't move. If you shut it down, the process is killed. When you turn it back on, it could come up on the same piece of hardware.
Right.
But in an environment like a cloud, I would say it's probably more likely that it will come up on a different piece of hardware. I would think it's more likely.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's ways to tell like whether it moved or not, but ultimately, like, who cares?
Right. Well, exactly. That's kind of my point, though, right? That's one of the differences. Whereas, I mean, I guess if you're in a clustered environment on-prem, it's a similarity, right? Because the same thing could happen there. If you're in a cluster and you shut down your system and turn it back on, it could come back on a different machine, but you have a lot more control over that.
Right.
Which means that from a security perspective, everything needs to account for that. You can't count on it always being on the same physical piece of hardware, and even more so in the cloud, because you don't even know what that physical piece of hardware was. Right. Like
right.
You can't identify.
It's entirely possible you end up on a piece of hardware that has somebody else who's just like hammering the hell out of the machine, and you'll suffer for it. It happens.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. Now, I would assume they have logic that tries to determine this host is overutilized and that host is not, and that they put you on the one that is less utilized.
Yeah, but if you're already on a host, if you're already on a host, and somebody starts like slamming away on it, like, again, you're going to suffer.
Right.
Enjoy.
Now, this comes down to, though, some of the other topics we've talked about, where systems running in a cloud provider should not be treated the same as a system running on-prem, right? On-prem, it's the old cattle versus pets argument, right? On-prem, you might have a very carefully crafted machine which does a specific thing and is very predictable, and you probably treat it like gold, because if it were to explode, it would mean re-handcrafting that machine, right? Whereas in the cloud, you can do that. You can absolutely do that. You can still spin up a VM and handcraft it the way you want it to be. The processes are slightly different, but the idea is the same. But on a cloud provider, it not only does it benefit you to be able to quickly stop and start machines for the reason we were just describing, but it also benefits you to be able to rebuild them quickly in the case of an outage, or in the case of, I guess I'm blanking on the other reason I'm trying to describe here, but if you want to scale, you want to be able to quickly build them as well. Scalability, and to be honest, most cloud providers don't even guarantee that your machine will be up 100% of the time. In fact, they tell you that it may not be up 100% of the time, which is why you need to have resiliency built in, and the ability to redeploy, the ability to spin up that same workload somewhere else.
Right. So when you're dealing with a traditional VM style in cloud, whether it's EC2 or in Azure, the machine itself, like once you have the machine running, your disks are going to stay available, barring any major complications at the provider. But your disks will stay available, so you can customize it and you can shut it down and spin it back up again, and you'll have the same thing. But if you're looking for scaling or to create a bunch of them, that's where you get to the point where you want to start creating images, like golden images of your complete setup that can then be sort of shuffled out. Otherwise, you'll spin up from, say, a bare bones, Linux distro of some sort, and then you have to run like Ansible or Puppet or, insert your favorite tool here and wait for it to do all of the things that it does to make it your machine.
Right. All right, so we're spending a lot of time talking about running a VM or like an instance like that in a cloud provider. These methodologies and the way in which you would protect these things may change if you're doing something like using what's the word I'm looking for? The services provided by AWS. If you were a cloud native application, I think is the buzzword I'm looking for, where instead of running an EC2 instance that has the OS that you want on it and the services you want on it, you're leveraging all of the API-driven services that Amazon offers, like Lambda and like, RDS, and I don't know, there's a billion at this point. I've never spun up an application like that. Have you? Or have you mostly run on like EC2 style VMs?
The majority of what I've done is EC2, but I've played with Lambda a little bit. We've used API Gateway, MSK, I think it's called, the Kafka service. I've played with some of the different RDS databases. So I've played with a bunch of the different tools, and they're, for the most part, they're pretty straightforward. Security wise, the majority of them all use security groups, so it's kind of pretty cut and dry. It makes it really easy. Like I said, like you can use the same security group for a Lambda coming in and say, you have it applied to the Lambda, and then your backend servers can say, anything that comes from this security group, which should be a Lambda, we'll allow that in. So everything's kind of very tied together, which is nice until you try to leave.
So if you're doing, I'll just use RDS as an example, right? You don't have control over the operating system that it's running on like you would on EC2, right? On EC2, you might do some things to harden that machine because that's what you do on a Linux box, where you have all that control. With something like RDS or any of the other services that are offered, you don't have that level of access. You have to sort of depend on the cloud provider to do that. So you do your best then to limit it based on port and IP address, right? And user and password, I'd assume, or keys.
Yeah, user, password, access keys, whatever the authentication mechanism is.
Right.
But on the plus side is, like, you're not hardening the OS,
right?
Nor do you have any idea what OS it is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, the only thing that's exposed to you is the port for the database. You don't have any other ports open to you for that whatever machine that's running on. In fact, it's entirely possible. I don't know how they do the engineering on the back end, but it's entirely possible that the IP address and port that they give you isn't even tied to that machine. You can do some fancy routing,
some kind of
and
load
switching
balancer
and everything else.
or routing or something like that. Yeah,
there's all sorts of craziness you can do, because, like, especially when you're dealing with like the RDS clusters, like some of those setups can have multiple, many machines in them. So you have like a single endpoint or a failover endpoint, and that's it. But there's more than two machines there, so something is happening to make sure that that balances over to the other machines.
Right. So I guess the point I was trying to get at there was, well, one, like, how are these things secured? And that pretty much covers it, right? From your perspective, it's secured by you set up who should have access to it through that security group. And then, of course, you make sure that whatever you use to authenticate to it is kept secure, whether that's an API key or username and a password or some other sort of token or key or something like that.
So your security for a database is only the database layer. You don't have to worry about securing the machine. So you worry about creating access, multiple different access levels for, this application needs access to these tables, and this application needs access to these tables, and make sure the passwords are strong, that sort of thing. I believe it's everything uses TLS by default, or whatever proprietary is available, because I think they have Oracle now, and God only knows what that uses.
Whatever it is, I'm sure it's expensive.
Yeah, yes. So whatever secure mechanisms are available to connect to the database, and then you have it all wrapped up in security groups to prevent, basically that's your firewall.
All right. So really, the differences here are they end at the database layer, or I should say the similarities end at the database layer. The differences come everything beyond that. If you're running a Linux box with your own relational database on top of it, you're responsible to protect everything from the kernel on up to the service, on up to the access, right? Like soup to nuts is your responsibility. You need to harden the OS. You need to make sure that it's got, whatever your security controls are in place, whether they're host-based firewalls or network firewalls or whatever. Whereas if you're running a service, or I should say utilizing a cloud provider provided service like RDS, you don't care. You don't have to care. Well, maybe you care, but you don't have to care. And even if you do care, you don't have any control over what's beyond that access point. What's beyond I've authenticated the database and I can get my data out. Right.
And
so
they manage patching for you as well. So
right.
You don't even you can choose the major version typically of the database that you want.
Right.
But beyond that, they automatically patch for you.
Yeah,
you'll get some warning. They'll let you know, but
yeah.
But depending on how you have it set up, for some setups they do rolling patches where it won't actually take your service down, and other setups, like if you set it up without any sort of clustering, it's going to go down, and it upgrades it, and then it comes back up.
So the cool thing is that you don't have to be the one doing those updates. Right. If you're afraid of losing that level of control, though, that's a consideration, right? If you're one of those folks who just needs to be able to do that yourself, or wants the control over what version you're running or whatever, specific down to what patch level you're at, right? Then this may not be for you. But again, that's not necessarily a security discussion. I guess it is in some cases. But it means that, the next name CVE against whatever backend is behind RDS comes out, you not only do you not know if it's been impacted unless Amazon tells you, you don't have the power to patch it. You have to wait for them to do it, which is both good and bad, right? I'm not saying that's a negative. I'm saying that that's you don't have to lose sleep over it unless you're really a worrier.
Yeah, the one thing that I will say about using services like that is that it forces, you can choose not to, but it forces development of applications to be more resilient. So the developers should be writing their applications such that if the database is down for some reason, it automatically fails over to the backup, or because depending on how you have the cluster set up, or if it goes down, the application says, okay, database is down, I'm going to mark the site as unavailable, or pieces of the site as unavailable, and I'll continue monitoring the database until it comes back up, right? There's a million different ways to do this, but
that's an interesting concept. So the site isn't necessarily down, but the pieces that require that particular service could be. I've never really seen that approach. That just never really occurred to me.
So instead of, I'm not sure that anybody has done this, but instead of having the WordPress, database problem page that just comes up and says database is broke,
right,
and that's all you get on the page, instead you can have it, the database goes down for some reason, you can have the page go to hey, the site is currently under maintenance, we're aware of it.
It could go to a cached copy of the page.
Could go to a cache copy, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, there's a million different ways to do it.
Yeah.
It can more gracefully fail as opposed to just popping up an error that nobody knows what to do with unless you're running the system.
Right, that nobody cares about. All you know is your customers are seeing a database error, right? Which obviously is, in some cases, that's like nightmare fuel. In some cases, it's whatever. They'll move on.
Yep. So the other caveat with a lot of AWS services is that you can choose whether the service is public or private. So For instance, with RDS, you can say that it's publicly accessible or it's privately accessible. Private means it's only accessible inside of your specific AWS instance on your IP ranges that you have set up. Public means it's going to have a public IP. You can still put security groups around it, but it has a public IP. So if you screw up your security group, you might let somebody in. People stop making databases public. This is just dumb. But it's there. It's possible to do it.
Or
just
S3 buckets.
be careful. I should put the article in the news, but apparently S3 buckets are publicly disabled by default now. Finally, after 11 billion years.
I know they've been slowly but surely like reining in that default posture. It used to just be the default was they're public and they're open, which was crazy. And then it was like, yeah, they're public, but they're password protected now. So now they're by default they're not even public.
Yep. I haven't confirmed this, but this is news that I saw flow across the other day.
It's probably good. Although I mean, I'd imagine there's somebody at Amazon, or maybe a team of somebody's at Amazon, that make judgment calls based on the most frequent use of these buckets, right? And if the most frequent use is data that should not be public and should be behind a password, then that should be the default.
Yeah, I mean, given the age of S3, I imagine that the original defaults were more of a, hey, we need to put values in for this. It sounds like this stuff should be public. Just make it public.
Right.
And nowadays they look at it and say like, oh, this was a bad stance. We should change this.
That was a bad idea. Let's not do that.
Whoops. Yeah. Like saying that characters should be passwords should be 8 characters long and you should rotate them every 30 days. Like,
right.
Sorry, that's a bad stance.
Right. Well, no, there was a day when that was probably perfectly fine. When passwords weren't as easy to crack because we didn't have the compute power.
Yes and no. I mean, if you go back and the guy who wrote the original document basically came out and said, like, I needed something.
Right.
I just made it up. It wasn't based on any
8 seemed like a good number.
Other than this sounds like a good number, and yeah, you should change your passwords so that people don't get them. Like that was kind of what it was. Nowadays it's like long, complex passwords, and password rotation should be based on what the password is used for, and enforcement is only for certain things. Right. So.
Right. It's funny that you mentioned that because just the other day, I was finally getting my wife to set up Bitwarden, so I could share passwords with her. I'd switched. We were on LastPass Family for a while, and then LastPass did some things that I didn't like with their pricing, and I switched to Bitwarden, but she never followed along. And to be honest, she kept forgetting her LastPass master password anyway, so she wasn't all that keen on password managers. So when I was finally setting her up, she's like, "Well, what do I set the password to?" I'm like, "Well, put in whatever you want." And the one she put in, it wouldn't let her set it because it was too weak. And I was like, "Oh, is that?" Because she has one where she has like a couple letters that are based on like family members and a birthday or something like that. And I'm like, "Well, that's not terrible, but it's not good for this." I said, "Make it a sentence. Just make it a sentence that's easy to remember. It'll be long. It'll have spaces in it. It'll have punctuation in it. Just do that." And she's like, "I can do that?" Like, well, yeah, you could do that. In fact, it's better than that thing you're using.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you left LastPass because of pricing, as opposed to them blowing themselves apart again.
Oh well, this was years ago. I
Yeah.
left. It was they had, I don't even remember anymore. I forget what they did. I don't even remember.
They sold themselves to the same people that to GoTo, the same people that own the GoTo stuff. And then they just started price gouging because that's all that company ever does.
Yeah, I think that it had some. It was definitely price that made me leave. It was like all of a sudden features that I wanted were going away unless I paid more or something like that. So I went to Bitwarden, which has been free ever since. Yes, there's a pay version of Bitwarden, but the free version does everything I need it to, so I don't care. Yeah. And if I wanted to, I could host it myself. Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, the LastPass is owned by GoTo. GoTo bought Jive. GoTo bought, I think it was GoToMyPC. Like all of those, every time one of those got acquired, like the prices got jacked up like Like,
Yeah.
I know people who left Jive. They were like, this was great last year because the pricing was reasonable, and now it's so expensive. Like, it's better for us to throw away everything that we bought from them and start anew with somebody else.
Right.
So
Anyway, I guess password managers are related to security on the cloud, huh? Use a password
Yay,
manager,
capitalism.
folks, and you can put it in the cloud if you want to. Yeah, yay capitalism. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess a lot of what we talked about applies to containers in the cloud as well. You want to pay attention, except in that case, you also want to pay attention to what your container images are based on. You want them from a trusted source, and maybe you want to vet them yourself or create your own. Right? There's lots of trustworthy vendors out there that make container images, though.
The same goes for on-prem. I mean, you kind of want to know what you're running.
Yeah, right. So containers are one of those that you can do either way. But you're right, the same deal. Containers on-prem or containers in the cloud, you want to vet them and make sure that they're based on exactly what you need and they don't have any holes in them. And if they do get holes in them, that they're patched quickly, right? So make sure you get them from vendors you like. But there's many ways to run containers on cloud providers, some of which are more akin to that RDS example that we gave, and some of them are more akin to the EC2 example we gave. So know what you're getting into, right? If you're running Kubernetes or OpenShift or Rancher or whatever on a cloud provider versus running EKS, right? Because I think EKS is the one where you don't really get visibility into the Kubernetes layer, right? Or am I thinking of Fargate
you
or
have
something?
No, so there's ECS, which is the container, the Elastic Container Service, which is just Docker. And in ECS, you have no access to the servers that run ECS. You really have no ability to get in there and do much.
I also felt like the pricing of that was like each container cost you the same as an EC2 instance would have.
Well, you pay for the EC2 instances. Yeah, you pay for the EC2 instances to spin those up to run the containers, and then you pay for the containers. Like, yeah, it's kind of.
It didn't seem cost effective.
but you have to add into that it's managed, so they're handling all of your patching and everything else, the networking, the patching, all the stuff that you would normally have to handle yourself when you spin that up. They're doing it for you.
Right.
At the EKS layer, you still have access to the nodes, like the worker nodes. You can SSH into them, do whatever you want. You have no access to the I think they're still called masters, to the
controller nodes.
Yeah, the controller nodes. I don't know what terminology they're using anymore.
I think it's controller node. At least that's what they use in OpenShift, and OpenShift follows a lot of the same nomenclatures that Kubernetes is.
Yeah, so those are managed internal, like by AWS. Again, they'll upgrade the whole 9 yards. Matter of fact, they'll upgrade the nodes as well, the worker nodes. So when you go through an EKS upgrade, they'll upgrade the controllers. So that's all, that layer is done, and then you can just click a button and it'll upgrade all the worker nodes in like a round robin fashion. It'll drop one.
It takes the whole cluster down and upgrades them.
It doesn't. I mean, any containers that are running on the node it takes down to upgrade are obviously going to go down. But I mean, that's the nature of containers. It should move to another machine. It does it pretty well. It's pretty controlled. And then if you have plugins, or I don't remember what any of the services like ingress controllers and any of the other controllers, that can also be managed by the EKS interface. So you could just say like upgrade the ingress controller to the next version, and click a button and off it goes.
Cool.
Unless you have custom stuff in there, but yeah.
So I guess what I was trying to get at was security for those clusters. If they're managed, I would assume is managed by Amazon or your cloud provider, right?
Yeah, if it's managed, they handle the OS layer.
Right.
They handle upgrading any of the service versions. In the case of ECS, they basically manage all of the networking layer and everything on there as well. And you just use security groups to get to your containers.
Right. All right. So I guess there's one other point, and then we'll get to you listed these different security tools here, right? I'm kind of curious because I've never been through this sort of thing with a cloud provider. What does audit look like on a cloud provider versus on-prem? Like, do they just gloss over the stuff the cloud provider is responsible for, or does the cloud provider also have to provide some sort of evidence to say yes, you're secure?
As in, if you're being audited?
Well, no, security compliance, I guess, is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Which,
So,
security audits is what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the cloud providers provide documentation that they are certified for certain things and
Right.
what it covers. Basically, AWS is SOC 2 compliant. I think they're ISO something or other compliant, and there's a whole list of them they have.
So chances are your cloud provider goes through their own yearly process of being audited and certified. And then instead of you having to worry about any of that, they hand you a slip of paper that says, we've already passed this. The only thing you need to worry about is your applications that are on top of us.
Yep. In order to be able to provide you with that paper, they have to go through those audits themselves. So they go through that, they get certified, and then their layer is certified. And then on top of it, so it's not like you can just say like, well, AWS is SOC 2 certified, so therefore I'm SOC 2 certified. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
you're SOC 2 certified.
Yeah, your application, your services, your EC2 instances, whatever, anything you have control over, I'd expect you'd still have to prove, yes, I'm doing the things you want me to do.
Right. You have to prove your configuration of their services. So there's whole lists of things that you can go through to identify. The nice part is, in theory, this is scriptable. So you can write scripts that basically go through and show you, like, pull all the evidence for an audit. You just like run the script like
boom,
whatever
boom,
you
boom.
need to, and then poof, you've got the audit information. Then it's just a matter of interpreting it.
Right. So that's cool. So this could theoretically make your compliance checks, your yearly compliance stuff, easier, because you don't have to prove that your firewall is up to date or whatever, because your cloud provider is doing it for you. All you have to prove is the applications on top of it and whatever you have access to configure. So, although theoretically that would mean you have a smaller team of people anyway, right? Like, imagine if you were doing it all yourself, you'd hand some of those tasks off to your systems administrators, you'd hand some of them off to your app developers, right? So I guess it's the difference is who it was handed off to. In this case, the cloud provider would be handling stuff that, like, say, your systems and network team would have been handling.
Yeah. I mean, you typically you still need a systems team of some sort when even in a cloud provider, but you don't have to worry about handling hardware and networking team wise. You don't need people who are configuring switches and routers and firewalls, but like it's sort of a different makeup of a team as opposed to, and they can be smaller, as opposed to having all of that brain power to, because you've got Cisco's and F5s,
like
and,
you wouldn't
92 different things.
You wouldn't need the guy that rack and stacks anymore, because there's no more racking and stacking. You wouldn't need the guy that runs the network cables anymore. You wouldn't need the Cisco engineer anymore, right? So yes, your staff could be smaller in that respect, but it could be bigger on the app dev and cloud architect side. So
Right. So you take those guys that did that stuff and you train them up to do the different stuff.
Yeah.
And you kind of swap things around.
Yeah, I'm not looking at it from I've just moved to the cloud, now I'm going to fire a bunch of people. I'm looking at just like if you were to side by side compare someone who does it on-prem and someone who does it in the cloud, how those teams might look different, how you get from one to the other as a whole. Like that's an HR decision that's above my pay grade. All right. I think that, so we literally had 2 bullet points. How are they the same? How are they different? And we talked about that for an hour. Almost an hour. So let's get on to the next bullet point.
The other major bullet point is security tools. And this is very much from there's a lot. There are a lot of security tools out there for cloud stuff. I've basically listed a couple that I'm aware of that I've seen in action. as opposed to trying to list everything in the known universe, because that would be crazy.
Oh yeah, and to try to talk intelligently about everything in the known universe would be impossible, unless it's your
Trying
job
to talk
do
intelligently is usually impossible, but
that. It is. This is Iron Sysadmin, after all.
yeah. So of course, because we're an industry, and security likes its terms and buzzwords and everything else. There's a term for these tools. They're called CSPM, which is a cloud security posture management tool.
Posture.
Yeah.
My posture is good. I stand up straight.
Yes. Yep. So most cloud providers, I mean, the major ones, honestly, I don't know much about Google. I assume they have one too, but like AWS has something called AWS Guard Duty, and you basically turn it on and it will monitor logs and look through your settings and just kind of give you information on, hey, these things are configured insecurely. You have these S3 buckets that are open to the public. You have these default security groups that don't have any rules. That sort of stuff, and it'll give you all that information. It's pretty configurable. You can monitor things for like malware protection, so it'll monitor logs on servers looking for known malware signatures. You can do like Kubernetes protection. It'll monitor Kubernetes looking for known bad things. It is passive. I don't know that there's an active version of it, meaning that it monitors and it alerts you. It won't make changes to your system automatically, which I'm, until you're extremely comfortable with the tool, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good. And if you're only using AWS, it's sufficient. It's typically, like that's fine. In Azure, I believe it's Microsoft Defender. At least that's what I got when I started looking it up. Not the same Microsoft Defender that's on your laptop that does other things.
I was just going to say, is that the same as
Defender?
Is that the same as Windows Defender? No, it's not. This is like Azure Cloud Defender.
Yeah, my understanding is it's kind of an equivalent to what Guard Duty does, but in the Azure world. So it's going to give you kind of the same thing. Like, hey, your blob store is open to the public. Like, that's probably bad. And it's configurable.
Right.
And again, it's sufficient for if you're only an Azure customer. But if you have both Azure and AWS and Google and, maybe a couple others, then you get into like, you don't have a single pane of glass, because everybody wants a single pane of glass. Everybody wants that one ultimate interface that just views everything in one shot, and you look at it and go, I see everything and my life is wonderful.
Red light, green light.
Red light, green light, cup of coffee. Yep, exactly. Yep, that's exactly where I was going. So for that...
Just that phrase brings back so many memories.
For that, yes, it does. So for that, what you need is a like a third-party CSPM tool. I can talk about two of them that I've seen recently. I like one better than the other. One of them is called Prisma. It's from Palo Alto Networks. The other one is Lacework, and it's from Lacework. They're both CSPM tools. They both support a wide variety of providers. And like every other security tool on the planet, they do more than just CSPM now, because you have to stuff every possible single service into it that you can. So it does cloud posture management, it does container scanning, it does active Kubernetes scanning. They just keep adding crap to it, which makes it more expensive.
Single pane of glass, man. How do you get a single pane of glass if it doesn't do everything?
I hate these tools. I hate them. I'm not a fan of Prisma at all. I was not thrilled with their interface. I was not thrilled with how it worked. They push very hard on their active protection. So they want you to plug it. They want you to turn it on and tell it to actively protect. So when it sees something bad, it fixes it for you. If you trust them, great. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't trust any of those tools at this point. So
that's a lot of
faith.
Scary thing. It's a lot of faith to
Yeah.
put in a third-party tool. You really have to be comfortable with that tool before you can let it
Yeah.
automatically change stuff. Yeah.
The other one is Lacework. Lacework also has active protection. They don't seem to push it as hard. They both have the ability to run like agents on your servers. Like if you have like EC2 instances or whatever it's called in Azure, you can put an agent on it and run it, and it'll pull logs and monitor file systems and everything else.
I think they're just instances in Azure. It just calls them. They just call them instances, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And then I believe both of them have now or are working on. They're either, some of these are still sort of in beta, but they're working on agentless scanning, which is basically like, you know, they're using either the tools built into the cloud provider, or they're taking images and scanning them, or like there's a million different ways that things work. Maybe they're okay. Like, you know, they both do sort of the same thing. One touts that it's better than the other because it supports more services.
Of course they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
marketing.
If you think about it, what are the main services used on AWS? EC2, EKS, ECS, S3, RDS, maybe like the you know, some of the queuing services, the email service, that sort of stuff. Like there's probably a dozen of them that are major. They both support them.
Yeah.
So the one that doesn't support, the one that supports more is supporting things that like most people haven't even heard of, let alone use. So, you know, it's all marketing. It's like, we support, 72 services. Like, yeah, but 70 of them nobody's ever heard of.
48 of them no
cares?
one cares about.
Yeah.
They're there for this niche market that cares about them. Otherwise, no one cares.
They both basically do what they say that they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I find Prisma's interface more confusing, you know, but that's more of a personal preference thing.
That could just be
I have no idea what they cost. I wouldn't want to pay for either of them. But I'm sure that the numbers are large. And of course they both have different ways that you pay. I think one of them you pay in like credits. So the entire platform is open to you. You can use any one of their services on their platform, and you pay with your pile of credits. Whereas the other one, you pay for a service, and if you want the other service, you have to pay for it.
So you have to go to the token machine before you.
Yeah,
start
I don't
up
even know
every
how that
day.
works. I don't know if you can buy more tokens or, you know, whatever. It's kind of goofy. There's other CSPM providers out there. But you know, for the most part, those I think are like the two sort of bigger leading ones. The other ones it's more the same. I don't know that I like either of them. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of it. I would rather, honestly, I think if you got guard duty and you got defender configured and in a good place, I think between the two of them, you know, yes, you're getting data from two different locations, but I would rather have if I was going to buy a third-party tool, I want a third-party tool that can ingest the reports from all the other crap that I'm using and then be able to give me a normalized report as an output. I want it to bring in Tenable. I want it to bring in, guard duty and defender, and I want it to pull in, you know, like all of your different scanning tools and all the security stuff, and then say, here's your hosts, here's the data that we have,
right?
You know, and if Tenable gives you something more than
you want like
normalize it.
You want like an aggregator.
Yeah,
is what you're saying, right? I kind of agree, right?
I think that's I think that's much more valuable.
This is sort of related. This isn't necessarily a cloud security tool, but it is, but it isn't, right? Have you seen Insights, Red Hat's Insights? Of course, I would bring this up because I've been poking at it because of what I do for a day job, right? But we have a vulnerability management plugin, or not plugin, but section to Insights now, and coincidentally, we're gonna have, in I think 2 episodes from now, I talked to the TMM that works on Insights, and he's going to come on the show to talk about Insights and the vulnerability management tool, because I think it's pretty neat. I've been poking at it lately. But anyway, it does like for RHEL anyway. It'll do like vulnerability identification and even remediation. But I had the same thought. Like if this just exposed all this via an API so that I could then pull it into something else, like that'd be even better, right? Because this is great for my RHEL estate, but what does it do for, everything else? Well, nothing, because it doesn't talk to those things. It talks to RHEL.
Did you just say RHEL estate?
RHEL estate. Yes, my RHEL stuff. What?
I know. It's RHEL estate. Okay.
My stuff that's running RHEL, my RHEL
I
infrastructure.
understand.
How's that? My
No,
RHEL
I
infrastructure.
get
Is that better?
I just said real estate. It sounded very
kinda funny,
marketing,
I
and I
guess.
have to give you the side eye now.
That is kind of funny. But yeah, and that's exactly why I was hesitant to bring it up, because now you're like, oh, the Red Hat shill is here.
No, I'm just making fun of the fact that you're doing marketing stuff now, which I think is
yeah,
hilarious.
no, I mean, I'm working on a workshop for the RHEL 9 stuff, right? And part of it is we wanted to show off this infrastructure, or this insights vulnerability tool, and it's pretty good. I think it's pretty neat. It's pretty nice. You can get like reports out of it and stuff, but I don't want to talk about it too much because, like I said, we're gonna have an episode about it later.
Yeah.
So if anybody
Yeah,
cares about that, I think it's the second episode in February. We're going to have John on to talk about it.
Yeah. My ultimate tool would be open source would be the best, but I don't know if anybody's actually doing this, but I would love to see something that would ingest all of these different reports, normalize them, and output them in a readable format.
Yeah, I mean,
I think a lot of what I've seen where people are looking at CSPM tools is because they can look at the reports and then they can click the button on the report and fix the problem. Like, I could just click on that and it'll fix the problem. Like, yeah, but what is it doing? Like, is it fixing it in a standard way? Is it like, what is it doing? I like understanding what's going on in the back end. I would rather have the report come to me, go through the report and say, okay, we need to fix these things. Let's go fix them. And then go put in proper fixes that we understand and that we've sanctioned, and build it into our automation, if because I think for instance, like the EC2 instances have this metadata service. We may have talked about it in the past, and there's two versions of it now because there's a vulnerability in the first version. So when you build a new EC2 instance, you should be deploying the second version of the metadata service, which is not the default.
Why would it be?
AWS. Yeah. So, like that's something that you would want to build into your automation. Like, sure, you can go and fix it on the 3 or 4 instances or 20 instances or whatever that you found it on, but you haven't fixed it at the core, which means that now they're going to spin up another 20 instances and
the
you're going
next
to be
one you
back to
spin
square
out
one
is
again.
going to be the same problem. Yeah.
And no button in the CSPM tool is going to fix that for you. Sorry, that's not going to happen. So yeah, I should probably just start a company and build this thing myself.
You should. Now, that would assume that the tools you're talking about all expose this information in a way that you could ingest.
Yeah, they all generate reports. And
but wouldn't it be better?
I don't know about.
Wouldn't it be better if they generated like XML that you could import?
Well, the Microsoft one probably does. It's probably in SOAP too.
JSON or whatever, pick one.
Yeah, no, they generate some form of report. Matter of fact, I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure that the AWS one has a full API that you can just query for information. So,
right. So that's my point.
Tools,
but does Tenable do that? Does every security tool on the planet do that?
Tenable actually has an XML output that you can use. Open source tools. Nmap has an XML output.
Yep.
There's a tool. The other tool that I have on this list is called Prowler. I've only at the surface really looked at it. That one looks like it also does an export of data. That one is kind of an open source CSPM tool that works for both AWS and Azure. And we'll look at all of your AWS and Azure. I don't know exactly which services are supported because I didn't dig that deep into it. But it'll compare it to like CIS benchmarks. It'll it's built right in. Hey, we need to meet CIS 1.5 benchmark. does
Right.
it meet it? And it'll give you an output that says like, here's all of the controls, here's what's met, what's not met, why it's not met, etc. You have that report. And again, pull that into the tool, normalize it. Then like at that point, you have the benefit of we're being able to run multiple. I run guard duty and I run defender and I run prowler and I run, these other 2 or 3 tools that I have. All of that information comes in, normalizes all of it, and then I can see and compare things. Because what I've found, especially with security tools, is you can go in and scan it with tool A and you'll get an output and you'll go, okay, I've gone and taken care of that. You scan it with the second tool and you're like, well, but I thought we took care of that stuff. Oh, it's different. It's this other thing. So not every
Right.
tool shows you everything. So, having multiple tools running is definitely a positive.
Well, I would say go build the tool and make $1 million, but you just gave away your whole idea on the air. I'm sorry.
I did say we should just make an open source one, so it wouldn't be like it would be worth $1 million anyway. But
I mean, I beg to differ, working for one of the most successful open source companies on the planet.
right, so I build the tool and have Red Hat buy me. Okay,
Build a
that
tool
works.
and then sell it to Red Hat. Anyway. All right, so this has been a fun ramble down the cloud security path. I didn't even shake my fist at the cloud, the whole thing. Are you proud of me? Because it's tempting when you talk about security in the cloud. I guess maybe we should touch on that briefly, right? Like data stewardship and ownership. Like, do we have enough time to talk about that? Like the cloud providers are certified to basically say that your data is yours and it's not going to be. We're not going to look at your data, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So from a legal standpoint, and this is the thing that always got me, right? From a legal standpoint, you're covered. However, from a did someone look at my data standpoint, I don't know. I guess you could encrypt it at rest, or you can encrypt it yourself so that they can't see it. These are things to think about, though, right?
Where's the key stored though?
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
how paranoid do you want to get? Is the I'm covered legally good enough? Those are things you're going to have to decide, right? If I have data in a S3 bucket and I've got it secured so that no one should be able to read it, but someone at Amazon can read it because they've got the keys to the kingdom because they're the administration at Amazon, right? But they're certified to say that they won't read it. Is that good enough for you, right? So
I can state that AWS, Microsoft, and Google all have financial, medical, and
Right.
government data in them.
Right.
They all do.
Absolutely.
Extensive amounts of that
Absolutely.
data.
Yeah.
So you can be as paranoid as you want, but it's already happening, and
Everybody
if
else is
those-
already doing it.
If those massive companies trust them, then so be it. I mean
Right.
that's
Right. But that was always my shake fisted cloud argument, right? And if you go back a decade and a half, that was what everybody was saying, and everybody has slowly but surely accepted that yes, your data is secure there, and if it's not secure there, we're all screwed anyway.
well. Are you 100% sure that your on-prem data is secure? That nobody in your networking server database, none of your technical people are looking at that data?
Because I can tell you, right, and you know the same thing, and probably a lot of people that listen to this show know the same thing. The admins can see your data. If it's on-prem, unless you have personally secured it and encrypted it with your password only you know, right, then they can see your data. Your email admin can go look at your email. Your file server admin can go look at your files, right?
Yep.
The question
I
is
will
whether you
say-
trust them or not. Now, in the
Yeah,
case of on-prem data, you could physically go to that person's office and choke them if you really wanted to. In the case of a cloud provider, who did it? Who knows? Right?
I will say that it seems to be easier to make the data secure in the cloud such that even your systems admins can't just unlock it and look at it.
Yeah.
Right. There's enough of a ramp up to have to pull keys and like there's all sorts of different stuff that you have to do in order to be able to view the data. So it makes it that much harder to get to it.
Right. Well, you're
so-
admins.
Yeah.
But what about the people administering the cloud services themselves?
Well, they effectively have to jump through the same hoops. I mean, they have to go get the key, and then they have to assign. They still have to do all of the same things. The difference is that, I mean, I don't know how it works inside of AWS or inside of Microsoft. So I don't know what tools they have.
That's what I mean. That's kind of what I mean, right?
If your data is encrypted, they have to get the key. Period. Right.
Well, if it's encrypted at rest, then while it's live, it may be unencrypted. Like while it's up and running, for example. Depending on what it is and how it's accessed and whatnot. And we could talk about this for hours, I think. But my point is that, in an on-prem deployment, there's always someone who's able to go see that data, unless it is encrypted in such a way that there's no key stored on the system which runs it, right? So like if that key is a password you have in your head, there's no data, there's no digital key that can just be plugged in to decrypt it automatically. Someone can probably go read that data. Now, does that mean that someone at your cloud provider can still read that data? I have no idea. I don't know how it works on that side. But they're certified, right? So they're certified to say that either they won't or cannot read that data, right? So and that means that legally you're covered.
Yes.
And it seems like for most people that's good enough.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyway, we've all got all of our data out in the open anyway at this point, so it doesn't really matter.
I just publish my blog anymore.
You may as well. Considering all of it's on the dark web somewhere. Anyway, I was worried we weren't going to be able to get an hour out of this, and it seems like every time I think that, we go over. And I think we're just a little over an hour, so that's good. It's a good point, I think, to take a break. And we'll get on with part 2 of the show. Folks, if you are only listening to this part, I encourage you to go listen to part 2. If you're watching us live, I encourage you to stick around and see what part 2 is all about. If you want to find us, to watch us live or find us on social media, just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter. Is Twitter still around? I think it is. It hasn't imploded yet. If you're only listening to this part, thank you for listening. But you should check out the other part because it's a lot more fun. We're going to chat about stuff, talk about the news. I'm rambling at this point. We're going to go to the break. We'll see you guys in a few. Where's the thing?
Push the button.
Where's the thing? Here it is. I'm going to push the button. All right, we'll be back.
Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysAdmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com/IronSysadmin. Or you can buy merchandise at teespring.com/stores/IronSysadmin. And thank you. Are you a fan of the Iron Sysadmin podcast? If you are, don't forget you can support the show via Patreon at patreon.com.
All right, folks, welcome to Part B of episode 131. In Part A, we talked about a whole bunch of cloud security stuff, basically a bunch of our opinions and a bunch of information about how to secure things in the cloud. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, go back and listen, because I think it was a good conversation. At least I hope we think it was a good conversation. Otherwise, why did we have it? Right?
Well, it's Thursday and we were bored, so got to do something.
Yeah. I mean, we almost ditched to go watch Iron Sysadmin podcast because we saw that it went live right around the same time we did.
Yeah, but we're hardcore, and we figured,
Yeah, we'll watch it later.
we want to be better than them.
Yeah, we'll watch it later. All right, so this is the part of the show where we have some housekeeping. We're going to talk about our usual announcements, starting with Patreon. So you guys might remember that from July of last year to the end of the year, I had pledged that we were going to take our Patreon funds and we were going to throw them at the American Cancer Society at the end of the year in honor of my mother-in-law who passed away back in July. And those of you who stuck with us and did not, cancel your your Patreon contributions, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on that. And we ended up at $436 came out of Patreon for those roughly 6 months. I waited till the end of December, so we got the Patreon funds from December as well. I threw in an extra, what is that, $74? No, $64 to bring it up to $500. And I made that donation on, it was like Tuesday, I think, Monday, something like that. And that's done. So we sent $500 to the American Cancer Society because screw cancer. Cancer sucks. So all of you who prefer to patronize because you want to pay the show, then if you're worried about that, we're now going back to putting the Patreon funds back to paying for the expense of the show. I was basically eating those for the past 6 months, which is fine. The show expenses aren't that much. But Patreon does cover them under normal circumstances. So those of you that are still patrons, they are Name Pending 197, Jeremy, Andrew, Tatro, Bruce, Robert, David, Solemn, Linux Sys 666, Mark with a K, The Mentor, Mark with a C, Andy, Jay, and Charles. So thank you all for being patrons. And as of, now, basically, as of Thursday or whatever, Tuesday of this week, your Patreon funds are now going to go back into paying for the show. So thank you all, and we appreciate you for being patrons. And yeah, that's our Patreon update. Sorry, I got distracted by something here. I just realized that the credits at the end of the show have to be updated for the patrons, which I forgot to do. Now I don't remember where that file is. I guess I'll just have to do that later. Anyway. All right, so let's see. From an announcements perspective, I think that's everything, other than what I already mentioned in Part A of the show, which is that the second show of February, we're going to have a guest on to talk about the Insights Vulnerability Service, and probably Insights in general. John's a fun guy. I think you guys are going to like him. So we're going to talk about that when the time comes. So look forward to that. Oh, I found the file now, guys. I should probably do this while Jason's talking about something instead of me just interrupting the show.
Now I'm going to stay quiet just to make you do it while you're talking.
Well,
It's not an automation yet. You don't just like feed it a text file and it just
I
does it for you.
I do, but I had to update the text file.
You don't have an API that just pulls that straight from Patreon?
I should do that. No, I download a CSV from Patreon and then I use awk to get out the names. And then I put that into the notes and into the credits. So the API is me.
So a curl command followed by an awk command written into a file. That sounds like a quick bash script to me.
Could be done.
Cron.
Could be done. Maybe I'll do that. Anyway, So yeah, if you want to support the show via Patreon, head over to patreon.com/Iron Sysadmin, I think is the URL. It's in the notes there somewhere, guys. Go look it up. And you can support the show. If you'd rather buy merch, you can find that on Teespring, teespring.com/stores/Iron Sysadmin. We don't have any new reviews, which makes us sad. Maybe it doesn't make Mark sad, because Mark got that bad review. Our only bad review. But who's counting?
Me, I'm counting.
Jason's like, I never got a bad review. That Mark guy, he's obnoxious. I hope he's not listening. I don't know why he couldn't make it tonight, but he couldn't make it tonight. He seems busy this week.
It's been a very busy week.
Yeah, well, we have an internal conference going on next week that I know he's going to. So it could be that because he's going to be away for several days, he had to like front load the honeydew list or something. I don't know. But he couldn't make it tonight. I really have no idea what's going on. He said he couldn't make it. And that's good enough for me. He also didn't make our Tuesday Night Valheim, which was disappointing. Because he's always entertaining. If you think he's funny on a podcast, you should see him when he's playing Valheim drinking whiskey. Did you ever get Valheim? You didn't, did you? Now you have a Steam Deck.
I have it. I haven't had a chance. I've been busy.
Dude, you should play it.
I'm a bad gamer.
You should come play Valheim with us on Tuesday nights.
Should. I'm a bad gamer.
It's a lot of fun. Although if you join us now, we're gonna have to tech you up, and that'll just delay everything. So never mind. Don't. You're not invited.
Thanks. I'll my son. I think my son has a Valheim server, so I'll just play on his.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to play with you. Didn't want to play with you guys anyway.
I actually have like 3 or 4 games of Valheim I'm playing. There's like my main Valheim character that I've been playing for about a year now, and with the new content that just dropped, I picked it up again. And I've got like 2 others that I restarted. Then I have one I play with the kids and my wife, and then I have one I play with Mark and some coworkers. Yeah. That game's like an addiction. For some people. For other people, they can just pick it up and put it down. But for me, it's an addiction.
I'm sure it would be an addiction for me as well. I've it's not on the Xbox, so I don't have, the Xbox games are like, I'm sitting there and I have 20 minutes and I can sit and play a game. I'm not jumping over to other things.
Well, Valheim's a sort of game that you're like, oh, I have 20 minutes, I'll log in and do some stuff in Valheim, and then 3 days have passed.
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, wait, what was I supposed to do? What day is it? Yeah. For me, anyway. That's how that works out.
Yeah. Why is my stomach grumbling so hard?
Yeah, in fact, I'm gonna go play some Valheim now. I'll see you later.
Okay. Have fun. That just means that this podcast is now going to be as long as whatever the recording space is that you have, because I can't remotely turn it off.
That's probably true. All right, so I think we've segued perfectly into chat at this point. Let's see, what do I have going on? On the 5th, I think it was. Yeah, very early in January, my wife had knee surgery. So anyone who's ever supported a spouse or loved one that's had knee surgery knows that you basically have to wait on them hand and foot until they've started healing, which is kind of the state that I'm in at the moment. That's why we couldn't record 2 weeks ago, because she was way too close. It was way too short after the surgery. And she like couldn't even get out of bed on her own. Now she's a lot better than that. She can move around on crutches or with a walker or whatever. But she was literally in a wheelchair last time we recorded. That's why we didn't record. So
how'd you get the wheelchair into the bed?
Oh, I just put her up to the bed and dumped her in. Isn't that how you're supposed to do that?
I don't know. You said she couldn't get out of bed. I figured she was sitting on top of the bed in the wheelchair, just,
I said she couldn't get out of bed on her own. I had to help her.
Yeah, because you had to help. You had to pull the wheelchair down for her.
Yeah, I had to.
Otherwise, she'd just tumble out.
I had to build a ramp and everything. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. You always take things so damn literally.
Am I not supposed to?
You must do that on purpose. Now I get it. It's
You
called
met my kids?
It's called smartassery.
Yes. Have you met my kids?
Anyway, what else I got going on? Oh, I'm tearing apart the engine in my wife's Jeep because she can't drive it at the moment anyway. So why not?
You can't drive your Jeep, so I'm gonna rip it apart.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's. Yeah, I won't go into too much detail. Although there is some cross section of IT people that are also into mechanical stuff. So maybe people will get this. But there's the engine that's in that Jeep has a problem where it will, after some number of miles, some people say it's as low as like 40,000, which if I had a car with 40,000 miles on it and it started doing this, I would like drive it off a cliff, I think. But this one has like 110 or 115,000 miles on it. So I kind of expect this sort of thing. But it has if you've heard of a rocker in the engine, it's basically it's like a little lever in the engine that has a bearing in the middle. And as the pistons go up and down, the rocker does things to like release, I think it releases exhaust fumes from the cylinder, right, as it comes up. I could be wrong, right? I'm not really an engine guy. But I watched a bunch of YouTube videos about how to fix this, and I thought I could do that. Well, it has one of them, the bearings went bad, and you could hear it. It's like a tick. Every time that cylinder fires, you hear a tick. So instead of paying hundreds of dollars to my mechanic, I decided I'm going to try to screw it up or fix it myself at home. And I have it apart. I have the new rocker. I'm at the point where I need to replace the old one with the new one and then put it all back together. And my God, has it been a pain in the ass. Folks, if you don't love working on cars, don't try this. Because it sucks.
We need to have a report when you're done with this on how many parts you had left over.
Yeah, well, hopefully there won't be any, because that is one thing I have learned over the years. This isn't the first time I've delved into this particular part of an engine. Basically, all I have to do is take the valve cover off, which is on the very top of the engine, and right there are these rockers, right? On my Jeep, I have been this far into the engine because I was just replacing gaskets and stuff. So this is just like one step further than I've been before. So, yeah, so far, so good. Like, I did this stuff to my Jeep, and it worked afterward. So I'm pretty sure this will too. But we'll see. So yeah, pray for me. Because if it doesn't work, I'm going to have it towed to my mechanic, maybe. There's that meme that says mechanic rates, right? The rate is this much if you haven't touched it, and it's this much if you tried to fix it yourself. So that's the realm that I'm in at the moment. Let's see.
Your mechanic doesn't do house calls?
No, well, I mean, I'm in pretty good with my mechanic. He may not charge me extra if he realizes that I tried to do it myself, because he realizes that I do kind of know what I'm doing. But yeah, it could be bad. Hopefully it's not. Luckily, I have my own trailer that I could tow it to him with. Yeah. No, I'm pretty confident it's going to be fine. I'm like 70%, maybe 80% confident it's going to be fine. But I could put a picture, I guess, in the... It looks terrible. I don't know. Do I have the picture here? I could share it on the stream. I don't know if anybody's watching.
I think we got a couple.
Yeah. But anyway, that's kind of what I've been up to. And that's been... I was waiting... Like, I was just going to take it to my mechanic because I did not want it to be several nights of work and her not able to drive her vehicle, right? Because we have another vehicle that I drive. And to be honest, neither of us drives a whole lot anyway because I work from home. Mainly where she drives is to, like, take the kids places and do grocery shopping and, like, little stuff like that. So, you know, it's not terrible if we're without one vehicle for even weeks, right? We've done it before. But, I didn't want to inconvenience her. But now that she can't drive, it's perfect timing. So I got started on that. And, yeah, hopefully I don't screw it all Let's see. The other thing I picked up a new book. And this was from, you guys might remember Eric. I work with Eric now in the Rel TMM team. But he was on the show, it might be a year ago now at this point. He goes by Eric, the IT guy. When he and I were at reInvent, he recommended a book to me by Brandon Sanderson. There's a series he calls it the Mistborn series, and to be honest, there's so many books in it that he wasn't even sure what title the first one was. So I had to go look it up, but and then I didn't put it in the notes. It's like The Fallen Empire, I think. Yeah, Fallen Empire is the first book, or Final Empire. And I
Final
put
Empire.
yeah, because it's right here in the link. I'm looking at it in the link.
It's
now.
in the link. Yep.
Yeah, the Final Empire. So I'm listening to it in an audiobook. I'm enjoying it so much that I recommended it to my wife. She bought it in paperback, and she's been reading it. It's a pretty good story so far. I'm like, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through it. I think it was chapter 29 when I looked at the thing to get the title to put it in the notes today. It's a pretty good story.
He's a good author.
Yeah. Have you read them? You hinted that you had read some of his work, but have you read these?
I have not read Mistborn. I read his Skyward Bound series, which is phenomenal. But he's a extremely prolific author. He did a Kickstarter towards the end of last year for surprise books. The first one, I believe, is actually a Mistborn adjacent novel.
Okay.
That one just got released, and he hasn't announced what the other three are yet. So I'm getting those. And I've added the Final Empire to my reading list, so I'll get to that eventually.
Yeah,
I'm in the middle of. I'm towards the end of reading the Godverse Chronicles by Russell Nohelty, which is actually really good. So.
Okay. Yeah, this is set in almost what you might describe as a post-apocalyptic fantasy setting, where
this is right up my alley then.
it was like an event that would have destroyed humanity occurred. Well, it was stopped from occurring, but then, and I haven't finished the story yet, so I feel like I'm not really giving anything away because I don't know the answer to this yet. But the guy who stopped it from happening then became ruler. And the story starts like he's already ruler and people are dissatisfied with how he's ruling. And the whole story is about like a revolution that's trying to overthrow the guy. And the event which he stopped from happening somehow turned him into what they consider to be like a godlike figure. They think he's immortal. They think he's omniscient. And these folks believe that they can overthrow him because they don't think he's actually that powerful, right? That he's somehow fooled them into it, or that it's all just, he uses other ways to make himself look as powerful as he is. And some of the stuff in the story you can tell, like it's the beginning of each chapter. There's this little excerpt from what sounds like someone's journal, and as you're going through the story, you realize that the journal is the ruler's journal from while he was going to go defeat this thing, this evil that he was going to do. And it was it's neat to hear like his viewpoint as the story progresses, right? You learn little bits about him. Without the whole story, you don't even really meet the guy so far, right? You just hear all these stories about him and these things from his journal. And it's a really interesting way to like develop a character without actually having that character do anything in the story so far, except these things that are like, he did a thing and you're seeing the effects of it, right? I don't know. I think it's a really intriguing story, and it's right up my alley because of the setting that it's in. I love post-apocalyptic stories. I don't know if you'd really call this post-apocalyptic. It kind of is, kind of isn't. I love fantasy stories, and it's a lot of fun. I like it. So yeah,
sounds interesting. So I'm gonna give it a whirl too.
You should.
So there's seven books in the main storyline, but I know that there's like a whole bunch of side stories.
Yeah.
That he's done as well. So
yeah.
I think there's a lot.
Yeah. So it's been a good story so far. And this last thing I threw in here just because I was like looking through Reddit just before the show started and I came across this thread. This guy found a safe on the beach. Like a safe with a pin pad on the front. And he posts a picture of it on Reddit and he just says, I feel like I should be doing something about this. I don't know what he was implying, but he just posted a picture. And of course everyone's like, you should be opening the safe to find out what's in it. And he goes, well, I picked it up and I turned it around and stuff, and it feels like there's something small and flat inside of it. You know, like maybe you're thinking an envelope or something. But, you know, I can't get into it, whatever. And then he left it there. Well, he goes back with a set of tools to get it open. And the thing that he finds inside is just hilarious. But I almost don't want to tell you because I want you to go look at it and see the... see if you find it as hilarious as I did. There's a post. I think it was highlighted in red. I don't know what that means on Reddit. If it's like a highlighted post or something where it says, "Dude, the guy opened it," and here's pictures, and there's pictures of what he found inside. Now we're gonna sit here in silence while Jason tries to find it.
Yep, now I'm scrolling through trying to figure it out.
But yeah, and of course all the Redditors are like, you know, making jokes. I gotta say, Reddit has been around a long time, and I didn't really get into it for a long time. And within the past year or so, probably since ditching other social media platforms, I got into it, and it can be a terrible place, but it can be a very hilarious place because some of the people there are just like the number of threads I've seen where it's the first comment is some sort of an inside joke. And then it gets carried out for 4 or 5 different responses. It's a fun community.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
And yes, the conclusion to the safe is quite hilarious.
But that one, there's a perfect example. There's a thread inside of there where someone responds with, "Oh no, not again."
And off they go, Douglas Adams.
Exactly. It was a reference to the pot of daisies or whatever from from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yep. Bowl of petunias.
And petunias, that's it. And they just picked up right from there and went on. Anyway, Reddit is a terrible and hilarious place. And
That it is.
And that's everything I had for tonight. I know I didn't go on quite as long as Mark does, but I tried. So what do you do?
Mine's even smaller. I've spent the last week and a half building a bed.
When you say a bed, you mean like a bed you sleep in? Like that you're sleeping in? Or like I'm building a bed for the dog or something?
So my son is back living with us for a little while. And he wanted... They basically, the room that he's in is... not big enough for his stuff. So in order to give him more room, we're building him a loft bed. So I've gone out and bought lumber and designed the bed and built the bed, and it's in the stain and finish phase. So I'm podcasting and they're staining the bed. Oh,
that sounds like a great delegation of labor.
It is. It was basically like, you want a bed? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Stain this.
You're staining it.
So if all goes well, the staining should be done by tomorrow, and then we just have to put there's like a rub-on poly that we're going to use to cover it. So a coat or two of that, and then I think we're ready to put it together, and it should be installed and everything this weekend.
That's cool.
And then they will have a loft bed.
I'm tinkering around with making butcher block. Have you ever seen how butcher block is made? Like, have you seen butcher block, like countertops
I've
and
seen
cutting
butcher
boards
block.
and stuff?
Yeah, are you doing the cubes, or are you just doing the slats?
So there's 2 different ways to make it. If you're going to make a cutting board, they say you should use end grain, which is when you get that cube look. So that's what I'm trying to do, right? And basically the concept is simple. You get hardwood, you cut it into slats or blocks in the way that you want to put them together, and then you glue them together. And then, of course, you finish the thing, right? So I've been tinkering with that. I didn't really talk about it yet because we're not done yet, and I'm not sure if it's really going to turn out because it's my first attempt.
You're doing it as a cutting block?
That's the goal. I thought a cutting board would be an easy first project.
Yeah. So my understanding of creating a butcher block cutting board is that you use a certain type of wood, and your finish is actually just oil.
Yeah.
You oil the hell out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it absorbs the oil, and it lasts like forever.
Everything I've read just says you have to use a hardwood, right? So, and what type of hardwood you use is based on what kind of finish you want, because all you do is oil it. You don't stain it or anything.
Yeah.
So I just picked up some oak, because oak is hardwood. I think it's oak. Yeah, oak. I just got like an oak board from Lowe's because I figured this is my first attempt. I'm not going to go crazy and find some like hardwood vendor in the back alley somewhere, which is what everybody seems to do to get hardwood. It's like, oh yeah, I know a guy. He's got a kiln.
And then you're going to use like what, 10W20 oil on it or something?
I don't know yet. I haven't gotten to the point where I have a board that is
whatever leftover engine oil you have.
Yeah, I'm just going to dump in the oil that came out of the Jeep. No, they say there's
it gives it the dark used look.
Yeah. No, the couple things I read about it, they recommended some people recommend something like linseed oil.
Yeah.
There was another one, but I forget the name of it. There's another oil that people recommended.
Basically, you want a food safe oil. Yeah,
right. You don't want to use engine oil. So, yeah. But yeah, that'll be, I don't know. If I ever get it done, I'll talk about it on the show. But so far, I've got a series of these things glued together, and they're all uneven at the moment. I'm trying to figure out what the most time-effective way to even them out is. And a lot of people say use a planer, but I talked to my dad, who does a lot of woodworking, and he says for end grain, a planer might not work all that well because it might split the wood. So he said sanding is going to be your best bet, but if I try to sand this, it's going to take me like 4 weeks of sanding to get them all level. So
you start with like a 60 grit.
No, so
you do the rough sanding, and then
the problem is, right, so I took a board, it's like a 1x6 oak, right, and I cut it into 2-inch slats, well, 2 1/4 inch, because I wanted to leave room for sanding, right? But the problem is that I used the radial arm saw to cut them, so they're not all exactly 2 1/4 inches. Some of them are like maybe 2 1/8, and some of them are 2 1/2, right? So you ended up with this like, bookshelf look where they're like ding, 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 ding. Sanding them will take forever because even an 1/8 inch of oak is going to take forever to sand down. So what I want to do is something that will like make them roughly even and then sand. But I don't know what to use to do that.
Hit it with a belt sander.
Yeah, that's what he said. He suggested. He said get a belt sander, which I don't have.
Belt sander. That'll zip it right down.
Yeah, I don't have a belt sander. So once I have one, I'll try that.
I very nearly owned one this weekend because I was sort of in the same situation. I had a belt sander and I have no idea where it went.
That's fun. I don't have it.
So we've moved twice since I've owned it. I know I had it when we moved the first time, and in the most recent move into this house, I'm almost positive I had it when we moved in, and I have no idea where it is.
It's in a box somewhere.
It's just gone. No, I have it. I have the tool chest that I have has a cabinet on the bottom, and when we moved it, everything stayed in the cabinet because it was very convenient. I didn't have to put anything in a box. Just rolled it up, rolled it back down, and we're good.
But now it's not in the cabinet?
So it's not in the cabinet. So, and unfortunately, like I just got, when my grandfather passed, I got all his old tools. I'm the caretaker. It's actually supposed to go to my uncle, but if he never shows up, I have a whole set of tools. So I've been like unboxing things and going through that. And, I haven't gone through every single box, but maybe there's a belt sander in there somewhere. I'm hoping, fingers crossed. otherwise I'll be buying a belt sander because I was doing for the legs of the bed. They're just 4x4s, 4x4 posts.
Yeah.
And I was sanding them down, and the one just happened to be like super super rough. And I was like, this is going to take me forever to sand this. If I had a belt sander, I could just hit it real quick and be done.
Yeah.
But I didn't have one. So I just threw, like I said, I threw like a 60 grit sandpaper on there and just went at it for, 10 minutes. And it actually, it cut it down really quick. Much quicker than I expected.
Yeah.
Well, it's not perfect, but it's the legs. I don't really care if it's perfect.
A softer wood you can get away with just hand sanding, but this hardwood, I tried it with my orbital sander, and I was at it for like 10 minutes, and it felt like I didn't make any dent.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the shelves that I built that are behind me, those are red oak, and sanding those took a while. So
yeah.
I feel your pain.
So my dad has a tabletop belt sander, which I may just take it out to him, or I'll get my own. I don't know if I'm gonna do these things. The goal was my wife got into this, what do they call it, pyrography, where you burn into wood with something that looks kind of like a soldering iron. And I thought, oh, this would be cool, right? We can make butcher block things, and she can burn artwork into them, and this might be a fun, thing for her to do in her spare time.
So your wife is a pyro?
She's a pyro, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's great.
Mine too.
Yeah. Anyway,
she's not really burning things into wood though. She's just burning things.
She's just lighting things on fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty much.
So I feel like I stole your chat. Sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I've been working on the bed. That's been going well. I'm pretty happy with it. And then I think the other thing that's really, like, I haven't, in my spare time, I finished that High on Life game, which was kind of hilarious.
Oh, you were talking about that last time we recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it turns out it was a fun game. I think it was put together pretty well. There's some pretty racy dialogue in it. But if you know, like, it's Rick and Morty style. So
yeah,
and given the recent news about Rick and Morty and the guy that's been booted from it and everything else, like, it's not really surprising. But I mean, the game was fun. So that I was playing that, and then I got a new toy. So I got this little yellow purple thing. It's the Play Date from Panic, the Mac software company. So it's like a little Game Boy with a hand crank. The hand crank is not to power it or to recharge it.
I was hoping that's what it was.
The hand crank is part of the controller. So it's an e-ink display.
Yeah.
It's crazy how fast it updates. It's super smooth animation. It's really neat. It's pretty cool. It's got, I don't know, there's like a half a dozen games on it. It's like, I get new games sort of every once in a while. They're nothing that, this isn't like anything you've ever heard of. This is all like indie games.
Yeah. Is it a monochrome e-ink display or is it color?
No, it's monochrome.
Okay.
But the whole thing is open, so you can write your own games. There's a game designer they have. You can side load the whole 9 yards. It's pretty slick.
It's funny.
I've charged it. I've played with it for a while. I've charged it once. It looks like the battery might finally. I've had this for a week or two now. The battery might finally be going down. But it's pretty slick. I've been waiting for it for like over a year. But it's neat.
It would just be awesome if the crank was how you charged it.
Yeah, that's what everybody thought it was when they first announced it. They're like, oh, it's gonna have a crank on the side. That's kind of cool. And then they came out. They're like, no, it's not.
The crank is for charging. It's for fishing games.
Yeah, it's got pretty decent sound on it too. So it's pretty cool.
Why a crank?
I've been playing with that.
Why would they think a crank would be a good controller?
Why not? So there's a surfing game that you play.
Okay.
And the crank changes the angle of the surfboard, and when you jump, you can spin the crank and have the surfboard do circles and stuff. So that's how you do all the tricks and everything. There's another game that the crank moves time forward and backward.
Oh, okay.
And so it kind of moves your guy through certain animations, and you use it to avoid obstacles and have things fly over you and jump over stuff. And like it's kind of they built it and they're like, okay, it's a crank. The crank is one of the controller parts. It's also got like it's got a D-pad and 2 buttons, so you can play like more traditional stuff.
Yeah.
But they're like, there's also this crank. This is how the crank works. And we're looking for game submissions.
So
and the community went,
so it's like, we made a game system. It has a crank. Have fun.
Yes, it's exactly what it was. I think
that's kind of funny.
There's one where you create music, you like lay the music out and everything else, and use the crank to play the music and use it to speed it up and slow it down, and it's neat. It's really neat.
How many fishing games are there?
I haven't seen a fishing game yet, but I know there is one that was coming. I just haven't had it downloaded to my Playdate yet.
I just thought it would be hilarious. Like, everybody goes to the same thing. Oh, we should make a fishing game. No, everyone's going to do that, and then no one makes a fishing game.
Yeah. No, they had one that was that, as far as I know, it was officially in the lineup for games that were coming out.
I mean, of course there would be. There's got to be. It's got a crank on it. It must have a fishing game.
Yeah, and it pops out of the case, and it's you can open the thing up and check out the insides. Like it's pretty accessible.
Although I guess if I was designing a game for a game system with a crank on it and it was a fishing game, I would make sure that the crank did not reel in the fishing line. It did something else.
Changes the angle of where you're...
Yeah, right. To reel in the fishing line, you press the A button over and over and over again.
Like the crank drives the boat.
Yeah, right.
Yep. So
just to be contrary.
Yep.
That's cool. It's a neat little system. Did you put a link for it in the? You didn't put a link for it in the.
I think it's play.date. I'll put it
so that people are like, what do you mean it has a crank? Can at least go see a picture of it.
It is. It's play.date. Yeah.
That's hilarious. It has a crank. It has a crank.
Where am I? There. Now it's got a link too.
Yay! It's got a crank and a link.
Collaborative documentation. It's wonderful.
Yep. All right. Speaking of links, we should probably go on into the news. So let me hit the button. So, speaking of clouds, we would be completely remiss if we did not cover this article tonight. And anyone who's watched any news related to IT or not in the past week probably has heard about this. And that is, this one's from CNN Business, although there's articles all over the place for it. Microsoft cloud outage hits users around the world. So, apparently Microsoft had an outage. It affected things like Office 365 and what do they call it? Outlook Online, Outlook 365, whatever it is. And of course the Azure
Isn't
cloud.
that just Office 365?
I don't know. Is it? I guess it is. I don't use it, so I don't know. Yeah, and Teams. Teams, which I guess is also part of 365. Although you don't necessarily have to have 365 to use Teams, right? Teams is just basically meeting software like Zoom and Google Meet and whatever. And I'm sure
software. Yes.
I'm sure a lot of people depend on that in this new post-COVID world that we live in, where everyone's remote now. But yeah,
I was going to say I didn't notice, but I think I did in that Teams broke a week or two ago.
I didn't.
And I was like, oh, that's. Yeah, I think that's the only notice that I had about it.
I don't use Microsoft's stuff or Teams at all. Not that I'm necessarily opposed to it. I've used Teams and didn't really like it much, but whatever. It's just another meeting software. Meeting software is one of those things where you pick the one you hate the least, and that's the one you use. None of them I think are really great.
If you get a choice.
If you get a choice,
have no choice but
right,
to use what they tell us to use.
But yeah, I have a choice. I can use Google Meet or Google Meet.
was the one company I worked for. The one company I worked for forced it was the company line. You must use Skype. Was it Skype? No, it wasn't even Skype. It was the predecessor to Skype. Link. You must use Link. That is the software that we are using. So we would struggle with using because it was horrible. This was, and I'm not talking like 20 years ago. I'm talking literally 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's like the job I left before I came where I am now. And that was their thing. You have to use Link. You have to use Link. And it sucked. And yet the executives all had Zoom accounts. and every time we had an executive meeting, we had to do it through Zoom.
Because they had their own purchasing cards. That's why.
Well, at that, because you could tried to do more than 5 people on Link, that thing would fall over.
Yeah, but that's what they made you use.
It was bad.
That's funny.
Yep.
So anyway, the Microsoft outage, I believe it was an Azure outage, but because all of these services depend on Azure, that's why they all went down. But they list them all in the article, probably because they don't know any better. But they're blaming it on a network change that was pushed out that they had to roll back. Now, they didn't elaborate as to what that change was. They may never elaborate as to what that change was. At least it's not in this article. But yeah, Azure was down. They said
a networking outage knocked out your cloud provider.
Yeah,
which is pretty much what happens for every cloud provider. It's usually a network outage of some sort.
Yeah,
we pushed a networking change and it broke everything. Oops,
yeah,
sorry.
Right. So, yeah, this isn't necessarily to diss Azure because AWS has similar issues from time to time, and we talk about those at the same time, on this show. But yeah, outage, Azure.
Outage broke.
Cloud provider
Broked.
All right, the next one you included, and I'm really happy you did. You want to talk about this one from The Verge?
I mean, I have no vested interest in this, but remember that Google Stadia thing?
Uh-huh.
That was the best thing ever.
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it. And then wasn't. No.
It was never the best thing ever. Don't even say that.
When we last talked, Google Stadia had been canceled, and they were totally promising that you can. We'll totally put out software so you can continue using your Google Stadia controller for other things. And for once in their life, Google did exactly that. So the new Bluetooth low energy support for Stadia is out.
I hadn't heard that they were going to do something to try to make the controller still usable. That was kind of news to me. I was surprised at this article. Maybe I had just missed it because they refunded all of us for the hardware we bought and the games. Right? I mean, I am legitimately surprised at how good they're being to the Stadia customers they are now ousting. Maybe they had to legally. Maybe they're doing it because they feel like it's the right thing. I don't know. But they refunded me all the money I spent on the Chromecast Ultra and the 2 Stadia controllers that I bought with the launch edition or whatever when the thing was first released. And I didn't have to send any of it back or anything. They just refunded me all the money for it. So now I have free controllers. Here's one right here. I just went through the the Bluetooth procedure that's outlined in this article. I did this one using my MacBook that I use for work, and I did my other one using my Windows machine just to see if the process was any different. And since it's all browser-based, it was identical. The only difference is that macOS made me confirm that... because macOS has that extra layer of security when you interact with devices. It made me confirm those each time. So if you're not careful and you're on a Mac, that could bite you if you don't approve that before you go to the next step in the browser. But otherwise, it was an identical procedure, and it worked. They're both set up for Bluetooth now. I've talked before on the show about that little emulator that I have that makes the Stadia controller show up as an Xbox controller, which for some games you have to do because they don't recognize the Stadia controller. That still works after they've been converted to Bluetooth. So basically, I connect the controller to the machine using Bluetooth, I run that emulator, and then the games that previously recognized it when I had it plugged in USB as an Xbox controller now recognize it as an Xbox controller over Bluetooth. So it's pretty damn seamless. It works.
There are a couple of caveats. Caveat number one is that you only have until December 31st to update your controllers.
That seems weird.
It does seem weird. I'm not entirely certain why a firmware update wouldn't work after December 31st.
It's probably
okay, sure.
because it's browser based, right? And they have to that has some cost to it, right? They have to host that. Maybe that's why. I don't know.
Yes, yes, I'm sure it costs millions of dollars for Google to host a site like
Yeah,
that.
but I mean, it's a service they want to be done with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I suspect that you will be able to update it after December 31st through third parties. I don't think it's going to be.
That's my guess.
I'm
too.
sure somebody will clone it and make it available.
Someone's going to find a way to clone it so you can still do it after the fact.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. The fact that an emulator existed for me to use this thing with games with Xbox controllers means that people care about these controllers, and someone's going to clone it somehow, or make a third-party tool that does the same thing or something. So
apparently the update disables the proprietary Wi-Fi that's on the Stadia controller and replaces it with Bluetooth Low Energy, which is a nifty trick. So the proprietary Wi-Fi won't work anymore. Which means nothing unless you intend to play it on Stadia again. Yeah. Which you won't be able to do. I guess there's a bunch of workarounds or something that people were using with these controllers to connect to like Android and other stuff. Yeah. So that won't work anymore because, well, Wi-Fi doesn't work anymore. But it's a BLE device now, so
it's
so you don't have to work around anymore. Now it's just natively supported. Yeah. Apparently it won't work with wired headphones anymore. So you have to your headphones would have to either connect to the other device or you have to pair them VLE or whatever. On the bottom of the controller there's a headphone jack similar to like an Xbox controller. I don't know why that had to go away in the update, but it did. I didn't use it anyway, so I don't really care. And I guess so this article came out before Stadia shut down, so I guess Stadia is shut down now? Yeah, it said if you wanted to play Stadia again, you won't be able to, and it said you'll have to do that in the next 2 days or something, because that's when it's shutting down. Yep. So the proprietary Wi-Fi, unless you had some third-party thing that used it, which I don't know of any, maybe there was something, you won't be able to use it with those anymore. And it's irreversible. They say that during the process, you can't go back. Once you've done this, you cannot change it back. So I did one of them and then tested it with the games that I've used it with to make sure that it still worked for those things, like with that emulator. And when I realized it did, I quickly did the other one. So mine are done. Yeah, so Steam did something years ago. Steam had the Steam controller. Yeah. Of which I have one. Yeah. And I think it's a great controller. But they did something similar too, where it had some support for stuff, and then they sort of phased it out over time, and the controller's not really supported anymore. But there's a Bluetooth, there's a final firmware update for it that enables Bluetooth. So, I can actually Bluetooth my Steam controller to my Steam Deck now, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Yeah. And that's the same stance I have with these things, right? Like, yes, I paid for a service that is now gone. I got refunded for that service. The only thing that I'm out is any service fees that I paid while I was a subscriber to it, which was like $10 a month. But I was playing games on it at the time, so I still got some value out of that money, right? Yeah. The fact that I get to keep the controllers, the fact that they let me unlock them so they're now Bluetooth controllers, the fact that they refunded all that money, not all of it, but the Stadia games I purchased and the hardware I purchased. I mean, I can't complain about how they've handled this. Yeah, I mean, I can complain about the fact that it went away, but I wasn't really that upset when it went away. If you're a Google customer, you should be used to that. Yeah, right. The day I bought it, I'm like, there is a 50% chance this is actually going to be a long-term service. So I expected this from day one. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah. I know we have listeners that have Stadia hardware. Now you have a way to set it to make it Bluetooth. Speaking of services shutting down, did you hear about the the airlines that shut down and
Yeah,
couldn't
it's-
fly a couple weeks ago?
It's really funny because I've only recently started to try to get myself over the aversion to flying that I've had for most of my adult life. In fact, most of my life in general. And then stuff like this happens.
Yeah. So this is how we're doing this. This is from CNBC.
Yep.
FAA system outage disrupts thousands of flights across U.S. So this is actually 2 weeks ago. It's not anything super recent.
Yeah.
But at like 9 o'clock in the morning, the FAA ordered all airlines to stop departing because something went wonky and their systems are all sorts of screwed up. So I don't know if they thought it was a cyber attack, but there was a problem. They started saying, they came out stating like, we're not sure that's a cyber attack, but there's a problem and our systems are down. So I'm not even sure what system it was, to be honest, but apparently it was integral. Oh, not the NOTAM system. I don't know what that is.
No idea.
NOTAM is a notice containing information essential to personnel concerned with flight operations. Okay.
So
it's a
their
it's a
SMS
notification system.
Their
Yes.
SMS system went down. They couldn't send IMs.
Notice to airmen. Notice to airmen. Apparently, that's what the name of the system is. Notice to airmen.
What about air women? They
It's
should rename
sexist.
it. It should be Notice to Air Persons.
Yeah, it should. No tap.
No tap.
Anyway, so this system went down. People freaked out. They started trying to figure out what was going on. And it turns out the issue resulted from a corrupted system file. They kind of went through figuring out what was going on. They rebooted the system, and I guess that didn't fix it either. And the problem was that both the primary and the backup systems were down because you think something that's this important as a backup system.
No.
They were both down because they were both fed by the same bad data.
Oh.
In the end, it turns out what happened is that they were replicating a database between the two systems, and the consultants or the employees, I'm not sure if it's consultants or not, that were doing this deleted a bunch of files that they thought were not important. And wouldn't you know, turns out that they're super important files. So,
and the change was replicated across the system.
Yeah, so a database replication caused a
Folks,
massive outage across the US.
Replicas are not backups. And I assume they had backups, otherwise they would probably still be down.
I don't know if there were backups or if they figured out what the issue is and fixed it. I just thought it was really funny.
It is kind of funny.
It was very funny.
It is kind of funny. It reminds me of the time that I took down the hypervisors at the college.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that managed the hypervisors by one freaking typo.
Yep.
One number off.
That's all it takes. And it
happens.
happens.
It does happen.
It's surprising it doesn't happen more often, but it happens.
Well, the question is, when it happens, do you have a backup that you can quickly restore from? And in my case, I did not. I did after.
It didn't help you. If you only had a time machine, you could just
If
send
I
it back
only
to
had a
yourself.
time machine, yeah. Yeah, the first thing I did after I restored those systems was set up backups.
Yep.
That was embarrassing.
So,
That was embarrassing. Anyway,
I think this next one is yours.
nothing like running a podcast called The Iron Sysadmin and then making such a stupid mistake without backups, right?
Well, you did it before you started the podcast, didn't you?
No, we had the podcast.
No, was it during?
Because
Okay, yeah,
I
that
talked
was
about
stupid.
it. I talked about it on the podcast. The episode was called "Don't Be Like Nate."
That was dumb, Nate. Shouldn't have done that.
That was dumb.
You're a
Shouldn't
bad example.
Shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have done that. All right. In fact, that was like only a year before I left the college. So yeah, we were absolutely doing the podcast at the time. My God, have we been podcasting that long? That's 4 years
yes.
ago. That's 4 years ago.
Yep, we've been podcasting that long.
My God. Why aren't we millionaires by now? Shouldn't we? Aren't we supposed to be millionaires by now?
Yes. Maybe. I don't
Maybe
know.
I'm doing it. I'm doing it wrong. I'm not monetizing properly, I guess. Anyway, our next article is from The Verge. Why are so many tech companies laying people off right now? And this is, I would call it an opinion piece, but it is backed by experts. Like they've interviewed experts about this. This was actually shared by some folks in our Discord community. And I just kind of read it quickly before the show, and I thought it was worth including because this is a legitimate thing that's happening right now in the tech industry. There are a ton of big tech companies that are laying off a ton of people. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of tech workers that are now out of jobs. And this article kind of goes into why they might be doing it. I'm not going to claim to be a financial analyst. I'm basically going on what the article says. So you may have opinions, you may not. Don't flame me, please. But basically, they're suggesting that layoffs don't actually save companies money. Because laying people off may save you in salaries. It may save you in, all the costs associated with having an employee. But they also lower your revenue because now you have less people being productive. Now, I'd imagine if you're intelligent about your layoffs and all the people you've laid off were actually not doing anything anyway, then maybe you'll save some money. But the article suggests that in most cases that just isn't the case, right? I don't know how. I don't claim to understand how companies decide who to lay off when they're laying off thousands of people, but I got to imagine they are hitting productive employees in cases, where they're laying off thousands, right? And the article suggests that the reason so many tech companies, and they name a number of them, people like Meta, I don't want to get the names wrong because I don't want to be let's see, Meta, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Salesforce, Spotify, and Stripe all have very similar responses to why they laid off all these people. And they're basically blaming the boom that they got in revenue from COVID, because all of a sudden everybody went remote. And that has now fallen off. And because it's falling off, they have to lay off workers, right? And the article suggests that, either that's really, really, really poor planning, or it's more like a movement where, oh, well, they did it, Meta says Google did it, so I'm going to do it too, because of investors, right? So investors look at this thing they're calling revenue per worker or something, and they say there's a target number for this, which is 500,000 per worker or something. And when you're not meeting that, when that's too low, then they start to think, oh, we have too many people. Investors start to think you have too many people. And if investors think you have too many people, investors stop giving you money, right? And of course, that's bad for business. So even if they're not losing money, even if they're not actually hurting, they're not actually about to go bankrupt, they lay people off because it looks better for investors, which, my God, this feels like such horseshit to me. But it's the reality of capitalism, I guess.
All hail the cult of capitalism.
Yeah, right. So, and I'm not trying to make light of all the people who have lost their jobs, because I'm sure somebody might be listening to this show that has been affected by these layoffs. But if I were you, I'd be extra pissed after reading this article.
But it's always the same thing. They laid off a ton of people. Were at my previous job, they laid off a ton of people and they blamed it on COVID. Yeah. And it was what was ridiculous was they were more in the physical space. So yeah, they had people not coming in as often. But they figured out how to do it and make sure that they had COVID precautions and everything else in place, because that's the type of company they were. And all they did in laying people off was burn out everybody else, because the same amount of work was there.
Yep. That's
you know, instead of having, you know, I think we had four, well, there were 3 people on my team, and they knocked it down to 2 people, because, you know, we were one of the small teams, but everybody had to take a hit, whether you know, and we were horribly overloaded with the 3 people that we had. I mean, we should have had a head count of 6 or 7 easily to do all the work that they wanted. But we had to take one for the team too. And then shortly after that, you know, it was probably a couple months later, they were like, okay, you need to hire people. You don't have enough people. I was like, well, what was the point of getting rid of people?
Well, you got rid of people. Of course you don't have enough people.
Yeah. Yeah. And then things didn't improve, and the entire team quit anyway, which was hilarious. But
I'm happy to say that even though our parent company has laid people off, IBM is one of the companies that has publicly laid off people. Red Hat's not talking about any layoffs, which makes me happy. Now, we are doing other things to try to cut expenses and whatever, and I'm not really going to go into that on the show, but they've told us that their number one goal is to make sure that everyone who wants to be at Red Hat can stay there. So I'm really happy to hear that.
Every company should always be looking at their expenses. Always, regardless of whether you're in a growth period or not. You should be looking at your expenses and figuring out what you should be spending on and what you shouldn't be spending on.
If your company is not turning a profit, then that's bad for everyone that works there, right? Because it's eventually going to fail. But yes, again, you got to be responsible with that stuff, right?
Even if you're turning a profit, you should be looking and making sure that you're only paying for things that you should be paying for, right? Like, you know, I've worked for companies that, you know, once a year will come back and go, okay, you know, let's look at the stuff that you know we've been spending money on. We have to tighten our belts and everything else. And you look and you're like, well, you spent $10 million on that, and they're like, well, we're going to cut that, you know. And the next year comes around, and you're like, well, that's still on your list. Like, what happened? Well, Bob needed it. Like,
or you cut it, and then something else was costing you $10 million that picked up in its place, right? And it's, we're going to cut that, and then
And it seems like even when I went through layoffs most recently, like they did the layoffs, and then they went, oh, we really need to tighten our belts, so we're going to have to go through all the you know what we're spending on things.
Maybe you should have done that first.
Why don't you do that in reverse, right?
Yeah, maybe do that before you cut off people's livelihoods. Yeah. Well, that feels like it's the way it's being handled at Red Hat. And again, like, it's not a thing I can talk about freely on the air, but I'll just say that I feel okay about, you know, where I am and the direction things are going. So. And I'm glad to say that, because we're a single income family, right? And that would be pretty devastating.
Yep.
So I need redundancy in my occupation, apparently, right? Because I'm a single point of failure.
Yes. Yeah, you should clone yourself.
I need a backup.
Make a backup.
I need a backup job that's just ready to go. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
So speaking of, remember that FAA story we talked about with the whole, you know, oops, we broke a thing and
we broke it again.
Yeah. So this article is from Bloomberg.
Okay.
NYSE mayhem traced to a staffer who left a backup system running. So this one is this week, I believe. Yeah, on Tuesday. If you're in the stock market at all,
and
you may have noticed that
I've never heard it pronounced NYSE before. So if anybody's not sure what he means by NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange.
New York Stock Exchange. I've never heard it pronounced anything other than NYSE, but okay.
I've never heard it pronounced. I've always heard it expanded to the New York Stock Exchange. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to distract there.
If you're in the financial game at all, you may have noticed on Tuesday that things went a little weird. Some craziness happened. The systems were shut down. Trading was stopped. All sorts of craziness. So I actually have personal experience with this because I worked on a trading system. When when the system when trading is halted for the day, so basically the trading systems typically work where they have a bunch of, it's almost like cron jobs. They have a bunch of timers that say that on this day at this time the market opens, on this day at this time the market closes, and there's like a lot more than that. There's timers that calculate things and do certain steps, and it's pretty much all automated. You can interfere with it if you have the permissions to, but it's pretty much all automated. Well, apparently, when trading is halted for NYSE, they do a series of exercises, I guess, to do backups and test things and et cetera, et cetera. And they have this whole big procedure. So overnight, all of this stuff happens after the market is closed.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that procedure is before opening bell the next day, all of the backup systems are shut down. Now we know why.
Makes sense.
Apparently, what happened is one of the backup systems was left on because humans are humans and they screw things up every once in a while.
Right.
And I guess what happened is because the backup system stayed online, when the exchange hit the opening bell, instead of knowing that it was the opening bell, there's like a bunch of calculations that it does based on overnight trades. And so it figures out what the starting prices are going to be for the day.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of this backup system that was up, it thought it was resuming trading as opposed to starting the trading day. So it never did the calculations to figure out what the prices should be. So it never did those calculations. And then all of the day's incoming trades came in, hit the system with whatever the prices were that they had set, which were very wrong, which caused a lot of algorithmic trades to go nuts because they were like, this stuff is either the prices are higher than we expected or lower than we expected based on all this. So they went nuts. They're selling and buying and everything else, which caused everything to sort of go crazy and tripped what they call circuit breakers because the trading just went so wild.
Right.
So a circuit breaker basically says a given stock or a given asset can move a certain amount in a certain time. There's circuit breakers that say that you can only move, for the entire day you can only move so much, or for the next 30 seconds you can move so much, whatever. Well, it started tripping circuit breakers left and right, which halts tradings on those assets. And then they sort of realized there was a problem, scratched their heads, and shut down the whole thing before it went even more wild.
Right.
And I guess in the end, there's lots of firms that are submitting claims to recoup their losses because they traded on bad data.
Right.
And I guess they've fixed the problem, although if they haven't fixed the workflow, there should be, like, personally, I think there should be things in place that say, like, if this is running, we shouldn't open, or there should be
maybe there is
better fail safes in place. It's only been a couple days, but maybe.
Yeah.
And I guess at the end, Tuesday, the exchange announced that it would unwind the most egregious transactions. So maybe not everything's going to get unwound and returned, but some of them will. But
you'd think, I mean, this sounds complicated, but you'd think that based on timestamp data, they could roll that stuff back.
They can absolutely roll it all back.
Yeah.
And it's not I would say it's not hard. I mean, it's not hard to unroll it. But obviously it screws up the bottom line for everybody because those trades now didn't actually happen. And whether they unwind it or they leave it, somebody's going to be in a bad spot because of it. If you unwind it, everybody loses out on the trades that they thought they had. If you don't unwind it, they lose, so it's...
Yeah, I get how that's... You'd think, though, like, the folks who benefited from trades that were made on bad data, like, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have had those trades anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, they lose out, but I don't know. It feels like that's the right move, instead of letting all these folks who lost money or whatever on the bad data.
They tend to unwind this sort of stuff when things like this happen. There's a pretty thick set of rules that they abide
Yeah.
by to deal with this sort of situation. So that at least is in place, so they can deal with it. But yeah, so even
they can deal with the problem, but they didn't have stuff in place to prevent it.
right, exactly. So, but they had backups. They
Yeah.
had a backup site. It was a remote site. They did all
Yeah,
the
no,
right
that's
things from the
that's
backup
all
perspective,
good.
and it still bit
Yeah,
them.
that's all good. That's all good.
Yeah.
I could just imagine, because I've seen situations like that where your backup system is online and it's conflicting with your production system because you brought it on for a backup test or whatever, and now data's going to it when it shouldn't be, that kind of thing, because you didn't route something the right way, or you didn't turn it off when you brought the live backup or whatever. Yeah, when I read the title of the article, I couldn't read the article because it's behind a paywall. But when I read the title of the article, that was exactly where my brain went. Yeah, apparently Bloomberg has a paywall, or it does for me. I don't know.
I'm not logged in. Open it in an incognito window. I'm not logged in, and I got there. So apologies if it is a paywall. I just clicked on it and it opened.
I mean, maybe it's one of these paywalls where you just have to click a button, and I didn't want to click it. I don't remember, but I didn't see. So, but anyway.
Yeah, if you do read to the bottom of the article, it's a lot of people moaning and groaning about how NYSE's bad and it's unfair that they rolled it back, or it's unfair that they're not rolling it back, or people are going to get screwed over.
No one's going to be happy on either side, because some people benefited from it, some people lost from it. The people that lost when it rolled back, the people that benefited don't.
Right.
Because people are people.
Yep.
People are greedy.
Yep. So
it's like the theme for the night. Hail capitalism, right?
Yep. All hail the cult of capitalism.
All right.
And that's it.
So
that's it. We're at our news.
That's it for the news. We can make up some news, or we could just finish the podcast. What do you want to do? Should we make up some news?
I kind of want to see what kind of news you're going to make up, but
at the moment, I'm too tired to make up news, and if I did, it would make no sense. So rather than make our podcast Fox News, I think we should end it.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Well, I mean, if you're going to make up news.
All right. This is not Twitter. We're not just making stuff up here.
You're right. We're not just making stuff up here. All right. So if you watched live tonight, thank you for watching. If you want to watch us live, you should look us up on YouTube or Twitch. Just look for the Iron Sysadmin podcast. You can follow us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, still on Twitter, although really all I'm getting on Twitter is bots. Or you can find me on Mastodon. I think I put it in it's in the links for our social links in the notes now. I've remembered to add it now. Find me on Mastodon. I'll be sharing stuff there. We've been tinkering with Owncast, although it didn't work tonight. I guess that's the problem with self-hosting things sometimes. They don't work right. But if you are very adamant that you don't want to support Twitch or YouTube, you could theoretically follow us there. But anyway, if you want to join our Discord community, you can do so on, there's a link. I can't read this off. It's too random. We've also got the Matrix space back. The two of them are bridged. So if you want Matrix instead of Discord, you can go to Matrix and get mostly all of the same stuff. I think the only stuff that isn't bridged are like the private spaces we use for like internal host chat and Patreon and whatever. Other than that, I think that's about a wrap for tonight. I want to thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/IronSysAdmin. And with that, I think that's everything. You got any last words for the night? Thinking hard.
Purple.
That's a good one.
Purple dinosaurs.
Purple.
That'll be my words for the last night.
Purple dinosaurs. All right, folks.
Last words. That's it.
So I can't say goodnight? I think I already did.
Well, you asked me if there were any last words. I gave them to you, and now you want to say more words.
Sorry. All right. Well, purple dinosaurs, folks. See you next time.